For the next 10 minutes, pretend you're my wife." The words were so unexpected that Emily Carter actually stopped crying. Not because they made sense, not because they solved anything, but because they were the last words she expected to hear from a complete stranger in the middle of the worst night of her life. Around her, the reception ballroom glowed beneath crystal chandeliers the size of small cars. Golden light spilled across polished marble floors. Soft piano music drifted through the air. Glasses clinked. Guests laughed. Waiters moved between tables carrying silver trays filled with champagne and desserts that cost more than Emily usually spent on groceries in a week. It looked like a fairy tale. It sounded like a celebration. But for Emily, it felt like the loneliest place in America. She sat alone near the back of the ballroom, hidden behind a floral arrangement taller than she was. Her mascara had long since surrendered. Her carefully styled blonde hair had fallen loose around her shoulders. The pale blue dress she had spent 3 months saving for suddenly felt ridiculous. She stared down at her hands, twisting a folded cocktail napkin between trembling fingers. Less than 2 hours earlier, she had still believed she belonged here. Less than 2 hours earlier, she had believed she had a future. Then everything changed. The guests didn't know the full story. They only knew pieces. Whispers traveled faster than music in places like this. A few people glanced in her direction before quickly looking away. Others pretended not to notice her at all. Emily could feel their curiosity, their pity, their relief that the disaster belonged to someone else. The truth was simple. The man she had loved for 4 years was getting married tonight. Just not to her. Earlier that afternoon, she had received a phone call that shattered every plan she had built her life around. No explanation that made sense. No grand argument. No dramatic confrontation. Just a calm voice telling her things had changed. Telling her someone else could offer him opportunities she never could. By sunset, the wedding invitations had become reality. By nightfall, Emily found herself sitting alone at a reception she should never have attended, watching a future that was supposed to be hers belong to someone else. Most people would have left. Emily had tried 3 times. But every time she reached the ballroom doors, something stopped her. Maybe pride. Maybe disbelief. Maybe the tiny broken piece of her heart, still hoping someone would wake her up from this nightmare. Instead, she remained frozen in her chair while the celebration continued around her. Invisible. Forgotten. Small. Then a shadow appeared beside her table. Emily didn't look up immediately. She assumed it was another guest offering sympathy she didn't want. Another stranger preparing to tell her everything would happen for a reason. She had already heard that sentence 6 times tonight. But this person didn't speak right away. He simply sat down in the empty chair beside her. Calm. Patient. Silent. Emily finally lifted her eyes. The man looked to be in his mid-40s. Tall. Well-dressed. Silver threaded through his dark hair. His navy suit fit with the effortless precision of someone accustomed to boardrooms, private jets, and decisions that moved entire industries. Yet there was nothing arrogant about him. No performance. No attempt to impress. His expression held something much rarer. Understanding. For a few seconds neither of them spoke. The noise of the ballroom seemed to fade into the distance. Then he glanced toward the crowded dance floor before looking back at her. His voice was low enough that only she could hear it. For the next 10 minutes, he said gently, pretend you're my wife. Emily blinked. The sentence hung in the air between them. Strange. Impossible. Almost absurd. She stared at him, convinced she had misheard. The man offered the faintest smile. Not flirtation. Not amusement. Something warmer. Something protective. Across the ballroom, several guests suddenly noticed him. Their conversation stopped. Heads turned. A ripple moved through the crowd like wind across still water. Emily didn't understand why. Not yet. She only knew that for the first time all night, someone wasn't looking at her with pity. He was looking at her as if she still mattered. And somehow, that hurt even more than the tears. Emily opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She simply stared at the man beside her, searching his face for some sign that this was a joke. Instead, she found calm certainty. Around them, something strange was happening. Conversations were fading. Guests who had spent the evening laughing and celebrating were suddenly paying attention to one person. Not the bride. Not the groom. Him. Across the ballroom, a group of executives near the bar straightened their posture almost instantly. A woman who had been speaking animatedly stopped in the middle of a sentence. Two men carrying champagne glasses exchanged startled looks before quietly stepping aside, as if making room for someone important. Emily noticed all of it. The reaction was impossible to ignore. Yet the man beside her remained completely unfazed. He glanced toward the dance floor again and sighed softly, as though attention was the most ordinary thing in the world. "I know this sounds unusual," he said, "but trust me." Emily wiped her eyes quickly with the back of her hand. "Do I know you?" she asked. "No, then why are you doing this?" For the first time, a shadow crossed his expression. Not sadness exactly. More like a memory he wished had stayed buried. "Because I remember what it feels like when an entire room decides you do not belong." The answer caught her off guard. Before she could ask another question, a sharply dressed man hurried toward their table. He appeared to be in his 50s, carrying himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to important meetings and expensive offices. Yet the moment he reached them, his confidence disappeared. "Mr. Sterling," the man said immediately, "I did not realize you had arrived." Emily felt her heartbeat stumble. Sterling. The name sounded familiar. Very familiar. The man beside her nodded politely. "Good evening, Richard. We have been waiting for you in the private lounge." "I know." Richard glanced toward Emily. His expression shifted instantly. Just minutes ago, he probably would not have noticed her existence. Now he looked at her as if she were someone important, someone connected to power, someone worth remembering. "And this is?" Richard asked carefully. Before Emily could panic, William answered. "Someone I am spending the evening with." It was a simple sentence. Nothing dramatic. Yet it landed with surprising force. Richard's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. "Of course," he said. "It is a pleasure to meet you." Emily managed a small nod. After Richard walked away, she turned back toward William. "Sterling?" she repeated. "As in Sterling Global?" William gave a small smile. "Unfortunately, yes." Emily blinked. Her mind raced through headlines she had seen over the years. Sterling Global owned hotels, technology companies, real estate developments, healthcare networks, and investments across the country. William Sterling was not merely wealthy. He was one of the most influential business leaders in America. The realization made her stomach tighten. "You are William Sterling. That is usually what people call me." Emily almost laughed despite herself. The absurdity of the situation finally caught up with her. Less than an hour ago, she had been sitting alone, trying not to cry in front of strangers. Now one of the most powerful men in the country was sitting beside her as if they had known each other for years. "This does not make any sense," she admitted. "Probably not. You could be anywhere tonight." "I am exactly where I chose to be." The answer lingered between them. Across the ballroom, more guests had begun noticing their table. Some whispered. Others openly stared. Emily recognized several faces. People who had walked past her earlier without a second glance. People who had seen her sitting alone and decided she was not worth acknowledging. Now those same people suddenly seemed interested, curious, respectful. It was astonishing how quickly perception could change. William noticed where she was looking. "Funny, is it not?" he said quietly. "What is?" "The way people decide your value." Emily followed his gaze across the room. A woman who had ignored her at the reception entrance now smiled warmly in her direction. A man who had barely concealed his pity earlier raised a glass, as if greeting an old friend. William leaned back in his chair. 5 minutes ago they saw someone alone. His voice remained calm. Now they see someone connected to influence. Emily lowered her eyes. The truth hurt because it felt so familiar. William studied the crowd for a moment before standing. The ballroom lights reflected softly against the polished floor as conversations continued around them. Then he extended his hand. "Come with me," he said. Emily stared at his outstretched hand. Every instinct told her this night could not possibly become stranger. Yet something in his expression made her trust him. Not because of his money, not because of his reputation, but because he was the first person all evening who had looked beyond her embarrassment and seen the human being underneath it. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. And all across the ballroom, people watched. The moment Emily stepped onto the dance floor beside William Sterling, the room changed. Not loudly, not dramatically. The change happened in the small things people rarely notice unless they are the one being judged. Eyes followed her. Conversations paused. Smiles appeared where indifference had existed only minutes earlier. It was astonishing how quickly strangers could rewrite their opinions without learning a single new thing about a person. Emily had not become smarter. She had not become prettier. She had not become more worthy. The only difference was who stood beside her. The orchestra continued playing a soft jazz arrangement while guests drifted around the ballroom beneath thousands of sparkling crystals suspended from the ceiling. William walked calmly through the crowd as if none of the attention mattered. Emily stayed beside him, trying to keep her emotions under control. Every few feet someone approached. Investors, executives, hotel owners, philanthropists, men and women whose names appeared in business magazines and financial news programs. They greeted William warmly. They asked about projects, investments, foundations, and upcoming acquisitions. Yet what surprised Emily most was how many of them immediately included her in the conversation. Earlier that evening, she had felt invisible. Now people wanted to know her name. They wanted to know where she lived, what she did for work, what charities she supported, what books she enjoyed reading. The questions felt almost absurd. William seemed to notice her discomfort. As one conversation ended and another guest moved away, he leaned slightly closer. Overwhelming. Emily laughed softly. A little. You are doing better than most people would. I feel like everyone is staring at me. That is because they are. Emily looked around. He was right. The attention followed them everywhere. Yet strangely, the embarrassment she had felt earlier was beginning to fade. In its place came curiosity. Why was William doing this? Why had he chosen her? And why did he seem far more interested in helping her than in discussing business with the dozens of powerful people surrounding him? Before she could ask, a voice interrupted them. William. The tone was warm but cautious. Both turned. Standing nearby was an elegant woman in her 60s wearing a dark emerald evening gown. Her silver hair framed a face marked by kindness rather than age. William's expression softened immediately. Margaret, the woman smiled. You disappeared from the private reception. I found something more important. Margaret's eyes moved toward Emily. Unlike everyone else that evening, she did not look impressed. She did not look curious. She looked concerned. Genuinely concerned. Are you all right, dear? She asked. The simple question hit Emily harder than she expected. Because unlike the others, Margaret was not asking out of social obligation. She actually wanted to know the answer. Emily hesitated before nodding. I think I will be. Margaret reached out and gently squeezed her hand. Good. Then she looked at William. Your mother would be proud. The words seemed to freeze time for just a moment. William's smile faded slightly. Not completely. Just enough for Emily to notice. Margaret appeared to realize she had touched a sensitive memory. She gave his shoulder a reassuring pat before excusing herself. As she disappeared into the crowd, Emily found herself studying William more carefully. What did she mean? She asked quietly. William remained silent for several seconds. Around them, the celebration continued. Guests laughed. Cameras flashed. Glasses clinked. Yet somehow the noise felt distant. My mother attended a reception once, he finally said. Many years ago. Emily listened carefully. Something in his voice had changed. She was not wealthy. She was not connected. She was simply there because she loved someone. He paused. Unfortunately, the room made it very clear she was not considered important enough to belong. Emily felt her chest tighten. What happened? William looked toward the ballroom windows where city lights glittered against the night sky. Nothing dramatic. His voice remained calm. No public humiliation. No scandal. Just hundreds of small reminders that some people believed she was beneath them. The sadness in his eyes surprised her. Not because it was intense. Because it was old. The kind of sadness carried for decades. And nobody helped her? Emily asked. William shook his head. Not one person. Silence settled between them. For the first time all evening, Emily began to understand. This was never about pretending. This was never about appearances. Somewhere beneath the expensive suits, billion-dollar companies, and public success was a young boy who had once watched his mother feel alone in a crowded room. And perhaps tonight, when he saw Emily sitting by herself fighting tears while the celebration carried on around her, he had recognized something no one else noticed. Not weakness. Not failure. Pain. The kind of pain that comes from believing you no longer belong anywhere. William slowly turned back toward her. People think power changes the world, he said quietly. Most of the time it does not. Emily waited. What changes the world, he continued, is deciding that someone deserves kindness when nobody else is offering it. And for the first time since arriving at the hotel, Emily felt something she thought she had lost forever that evening. Hope. Hope is a strange thing. Sometimes it arrives with fireworks and celebration. Sometimes it arrives quietly, disguised as a conversation between two strangers standing in the middle of a crowded ballroom. Emily felt it growing slowly inside her as she stood beside William Sterling. Not because her problems had disappeared. They had not. The heartbreak was still there. The disappointment was still real. But for the first time that night, those feelings no longer seemed large enough to define her. The orchestra transitioned into another song as couples drifted toward the dance floor. Golden light reflected from the crystal chandeliers above, painting soft patterns across the polished marble. The reception looked exactly the same as it had an hour earlier. Yet everything felt different. William guided her toward a quieter section near the ballroom terrace where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. From 40 stories above downtown Chicago, the streets below looked like ribbons of moving light. Thousands of headlights flowed through the darkness while office towers glowed against the night sky. Emily rested one hand against the cool glass and stared out at the city. "Beautiful, is it not?" William asked. "It is. The funny thing is most people spend their entire lives looking up at buildings like these." Emily glanced at him, and very few remember the people inside them are just as lost as everyone else. She smiled faintly. "That sounds like something experience taught you." "Experience has taught me many expensive lessons." Emily laughed for the first time all evening. A real laugh. The kind that surprised even her. William seemed pleased by it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then movement near the ballroom entrance caught Emily's attention. Her smile faded instantly. Across the room she saw him. Daniel, the man she had planned to marry, standing beside his new bride, surrounded by guests, smiling for photographs, living the future that once belonged to both of them. The sight hit harder than she expected, not because she still wanted him back. Something inside her already knew that chapter was over. What hurt was the realization that 4 years of memories could apparently disappear so easily for one person while the other was left carrying all the weight. William followed her gaze. He immediately understood. "Daniel." Emily nodded. "I take it he is the reason tonight." Became difficult. She looked down. That obvious? Only to someone paying attention. The answer made her smile sadly. William did not offer empty comfort. He did not tell her she deserved better. He did not criticize Daniel. Instead, he asked a simple question. "Do you know what I find interesting?" Emily shook her head. "You have spent the entire evening talking about what you lost." She looked away. "Because I did lose something. Perhaps." His voice remained gentle. "But nobody has asked what he lost." Emily frowned slightly. William continued. "A person's value is not determined by whether someone chooses them." The words settled quietly between them. Yet most people spend years believing exactly that. Emily thought about it. About the months she had spent trying to become the person someone else wanted. About the compromises, the sacrifices, the constant fear of not being enough. Slowly, she realized something uncomfortable. She had measured her worth through someone else's approval for far too long. Before she could respond, another voice interrupted them. "Mr. Sterling." A younger man approached carrying a tablet. His expression suggested urgency mixed with hesitation. "I apologize for disturbing you." William nodded. "What is it, Michael?" "The board members have arrived. They are waiting upstairs." Emily immediately stepped back. "You should go." William looked at her. "Perhaps. You clearly have important business." "I always have important business." Michael shifted awkwardly. It was obvious this meeting mattered. Emily expected William to leave immediately. Any other executive probably would have. Instead, he checked his watch and calmly said, "Tell them I will join them in 30 minutes. Michael looked stunned. 30. "Yes, sir." The assistant quickly disappeared. Emily stared at William. "You postponed a board meeting?" "I postpone people who can wait." "Because of me?" William looked genuinely confused by the question. "Emily, companies survive delayed meetings every day." His expression softened. "People do not always survive feeling abandoned." The sentence landed directly in her heart. For several seconds, she could not speak. Across the ballroom, laughter continued. Music played. Cameras flashed. But Emily no longer felt like the forgotten woman sitting alone behind a floral arrangement. For the first time all night, she felt seen. And somewhere deep inside, a painful truth was beginning to transform into something stronger. Maybe this night was not the end of her story after all. Maybe it was the beginning of one she never expected. The next 30 minutes revealed something Emily would never forget for the rest of her life. It was not a lesson about wealth. It was not a lesson about status. It was a lesson about how quickly people change when they believe someone powerful is watching. As William remained beside her, the flow of guests seemed endless. Men who managed billion-dollar funds introduced themselves with broad smiles. Women who chaired charitable foundations suddenly wanted to hear Emily's opinions. Hotel owners, attorneys, media executives, and entrepreneurs all treated her as though she had always belonged among them. The strange part was not their politeness. The strange part was how familiar some of their faces seemed. Emily recognized several of them from earlier in the evening. She remembered the woman who had glanced at her tear-stained face and immediately looked away. She remembered the couple who had whispered while passing her table. She remembered the man who had stared for a second before deciding she was not worth greeting. Now they approached one after another, eager to engage her in conversation. "Emily, you must join us sometime. We would love to hear more about your work." William speaks very highly of people he respects. The comments blended together like background music. Emily answered politely, but internally she felt something shifting. Earlier that night, she would have been grateful for the attention. Now she found herself studying it, questioning it, measuring it, because deep down she knew none of these people had learned anything new about her. They still did not know her favorite books. They did not know how hard she had worked to put herself through college. They did not know about the weekends she spent volunteering at a community literacy program. They did not know she had once worked 2 jobs while helping care for her grandmother. They knew nothing. The only information they possessed was that William Sterling had chosen to spend time with her. Somehow that was enough. As another conversation ended, Emily found herself standing near one of the reception's elaborate floral displays. White roses climbed nearly 8 feet into the air, illuminated by soft amber lighting. William accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing server while Emily watched the crowd. "You see it now, do not you?" he asked quietly. "See what?" "The performance." Emily turned toward him. "You mean people pretending?" William nodded. "Most people do not respond to character." He took a sip from his glass. "They respond to signals." Emily thought about that. "That sounds cynical." "It is realistic." His tone remained calm. "But it is also why genuine kindness is so valuable. It is rare." Before Emily could answer, a familiar voice suddenly cut through the crowd. "Emily." Every muscle in her body tensed. She knew that voice instantly. "Daniel." Slowly she turned. He stood only a few feet away. His tuxedo looked perfect. His smile looked uncertain. For the first time all evening, he did not appear confident. He appeared nervous. Beside him stood his new wife, Lauren. Beautiful, elegant, composed. Yet even she seemed uncomfortable. Daniel cleared his throat. "Can we talk?" The request hung in the air. Emily looked at him carefully. Earlier that day, she would have given anything for such a conversation. Earlier that day, she would have chased answers, searched for explanations, demanded closure. But standing there now, something felt different. The desperation was gone. William said nothing. He simply stepped back, allowing Emily complete freedom to choose. Daniel glanced briefly toward William before returning his attention to her. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay." Emily almost smiled. The irony was remarkable. For hours nobody had asked if she was okay. Now suddenly everyone seemed concerned. "I appreciate that," she said politely. Daniel looked relieved that she was not angry. "I never wanted tonight to happen this way." Emily studied him. For the first time in years, she saw him clearly. Not as the center of her future. Not as the person whose approval determined her value. Just a man. Flawed. Human. Ordinary. "I know," she said. Daniel seemed surprised by the gentleness in her voice. "You do?" "Yes." A long silence followed. Around them the reception continued. Music played. Guests mingled. Yet Emily felt strangely detached from all of it. Daniel had once occupied every corner of her heart. Now he felt like a chapter she had already finished reading. Finally he nodded. "I hope you find happiness." Emily glanced toward William, then back at Daniel. A small smile touched her lips. "I think I already started." Daniel looked confused by the answer. But Emily was not speaking about romance. She was speaking about something much more important. Self-respect. And for the first time that night, she realized nobody could take that away from her ever again. As the conversation with Daniel faded into the background, Emily expected the evening to finally settle into something ordinary. She thought perhaps the emotional storm had passed. She thought the hardest moments were behind her. She was wrong. Sometimes the most important truth arrives only after you stop searching for it. The ballroom had grown warmer as the evening progressed. More guests filled the dance floor. Laughter drifted through the air. The city lights beyond the glass walls glittered like distant stars. Yet despite the celebration surrounding them, William seemed unusually quiet. Emily noticed it almost immediately. Throughout the night he had listened carefully, spoken thoughtfully, and carried himself with effortless confidence. Now something felt different. His gaze lingered on the crowd without really seeing it. His smile appeared only briefly before disappearing again. It was subtle. Most people would have missed it. Emily did not. "You are thinking about your mother again," she said softly. William looked surprised. "Am I that obvious?" Only to someone paying attention. For a moment he simply stared at her. Then he laughed quietly. "I suppose I deserve that." They moved toward a quieter seating area near the terrace entrance. The noise of the reception softened slightly. A server passed by carrying silver trays filled with miniature desserts while distant music echoed beneath the chandeliers. William sat down and loosened his tie slightly. It was the first truly human gesture Emily had seen from him all evening. Not the chairman, not the public figure, just a tired man carrying old memories. "My mother loved events like this," he said unexpectedly. Emily listened without interrupting. Not because of the luxury. She did not care about any of that. A faint smile appeared. She loved watching people. People watching? Exactly. His eyes softened. She used to say every room tells a story if you pay attention long enough. Emily smiled. "I think I would have liked her. She would have liked you too." The answer came without hesitation. Something about that touched Emily deeply. "What was she like?" she asked. William leaned back slowly. "Kind." He paused. "Almost painfully kind. That sounds like a compliment." "It is." He glanced toward the ballroom. She spent her entire life making other people feel important. Emily noticed the sadness returning to his expression, but nobody did the same for her. William looked down at his hands. The silence itself became an answer. Finally he nodded. Not often. For several moments neither of them spoke. The music shifted to a slower melody. Somewhere across the ballroom guests applauded after a speech. Cameras flashed. Glasses clinked. Yet in that small corner of the room, everything felt strangely intimate and honest. "When I was 12 years old," William said quietly, "I attended a reception with her." Emily immediately knew this was the memory he carried. The one Margaret had accidentally touched earlier. "I remember standing beside her while people walked past." His voice remained calm, but each word carried weight. Some greeted her politely. Most ignored her completely. Emily felt her chest tighten. Because she was not wealthy? William nodded. Because she was a schoolteacher. He smiled sadly. A wonderful schoolteacher. But in rooms like that, titles mattered more than character. Emily looked toward the crowded ballroom. Suddenly the evening made even more sense. William was not helping her because he felt sorry for her. He was protecting something sacred. A lesson he learned as a boy. A promise he had silently carried for decades. "What happened afterward?" she asked. William stared toward the city lights beyond the glass. "On the drive home, I asked if the way they treated her hurt." Emily waited. "She told me something I never forgot." His voice softened. She said, "William, never waste your life trying to sit at someone else's table. Build a longer one." The words settled between them like a prayer. Emily felt goosebumps rise along her arms. "That sounds exactly like something a teacher would say." William smiled. "It does." Then he looked directly at her. "Do you know why I stayed tonight instead of going upstairs to that board meeting?" Emily shook her head. "Because 30 years ago nobody sat beside my mother." The answer stole her breath. William continued before she could respond. "I promised myself that if I ever had the power to change that moment for someone else, I would." Emotion tightened Emily's throat. For the second time that evening, tears threatened to return. But these were different. Not tears of heartbreak. Not tears of humiliation. Gratitude. Understanding. Healing. William noticed immediately. "Do not cry," he said gently. "Tonight is not about what was taken from you." He smiled. "It is about what you are finally beginning to see." And for the first time, Emily understood exactly what he meant. Emily thought she understood why William had helped her. She thought the mystery had finally been solved. A promise made decades earlier. A memory of his mother. A successful man honoring a lesson he never forgot. It was a beautiful explanation. It was also incomplete. The reception was slowly approaching its final hours. Several guests had already begun leaving. Valet attendants moved in and out of the hotel entrance below. The orchestra had switched to softer music. Conversations became quieter, more personal. The energy of the evening had shifted from celebration to reflection. Emily and William remained seated near the terrace, watching the ballroom from a distance. For the first time all night, neither felt the need to fill every silence. Some silences heal more than words. William glanced at his watch. Nearly 3 hours had passed since he first sat beside her. 3 hours that should have been spent in meetings, negotiations, and business discussions. Yet he showed no sign of regret. Emily finally asked the question that had been lingering in her mind. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How did you know?" William tilted his head slightly. "Know what?" "That I was sitting there alone." He smiled faintly. "I saw you." Emily laughed softly. "I know that part." "Then what are you asking?" She hesitated. "How did you know I needed someone to sit down beside me?" The smile disappeared. Not because the question bothered him, because it touched something deeper. William leaned back in his chair and looked toward the ballroom ceiling where thousands of crystal reflections danced across the room. "Because I have been where you were." Emily frowned. "You?" He nodded. "Many years ago." She struggled to imagine it. William Sterling, billionaire chairman, industry leader, the man everyone in this room seemed desperate to impress. Alone? Forgotten? It felt impossible. William noticed her skepticism. People see success and assume it arrived first. His voice was calm. "It never does." Emily listened carefully. "When I was 23, I attended an event not unlike this one." He paused. "I had no money, no influence, no accomplishments worth mentioning." "What happened?" "Nothing." The answer surprised her. William smiled sadly. "That was the problem." He looked toward the crowd. "Nobody noticed me. Nobody spoke to me. Nobody cared whether I stayed or left." Emily understood immediately, not because the circumstances matched, because the feeling did. The feeling of becoming invisible while surrounded by people. William continued. "At the time, I thought the solution was success." He shook his head slowly. "I spent years chasing achievement because I believed achievement would earn belonging." "Did it?" William laughed quietly. "It earned attention." The distinction hung heavily between them. "Not the same thing?" Emily asked. "Not even close." Across the ballroom, guests continued smiling and socializing. Yet for the first time, Emily noticed how many conversations seemed transactional. How many introductions carried hidden expectations. How many relationships revolved around status rather than connection. William followed her gaze. The world teaches people to chase importance. And most never realize they are actually searching for significance. Emily thought about that for a long moment. Then something occurred to her. "Earlier you said you saw me." William nodded. "Yes." "Where were you?" A knowing smile appeared. "Near the entrance." Emily blinked. "You saw everything?" "Almost." Suddenly pieces began falling into place. The timing. The way he seemed to understand her emotions before she explained them. The certainty with which he approached her. None of it had been random. William had been watching from the beginning. "You knew about Daniel." "Yes." "You saw me sitting alone." "Yes." "And you still came over?" His answer arrived without hesitation. "Especially because you were sitting alone." Emotion tightened her throat again. Not sadness this time. Something warmer. More profound. For a moment she looked away, blinking back tears. William pretended not to notice. A small act of kindness she appreciated. Finally Emily smiled. "You know something?" "What?" "Your mother was right." William raised an eyebrow. "About building a longer table." A slow smile spread across his face. Not the public smile used for cameras. Not the polite smile reserved for business partners. A genuine one. She usually was. Emily looked around the ballroom one last time. Earlier that evening, she had believed she was witnessing the collapse of her future. Now she realized something remarkable. The most important person she met all night was not the man she lost. It was the stranger who chose to stay. And neither of them yet understood that the most surprising part of the story was still waiting ahead. The reception was beginning to wind down when the final piece of the puzzle quietly revealed itself. Not through a grand announcement. Not through a dramatic confrontation. Life rarely works that way. The most important truths usually arrive in a whisper. Emily stood beside the terrace railing, looking out across the Chicago skyline. The city stretched for miles beneath the midnight sky, glowing with thousands of lights. Earlier that evening, those lights had felt cold and distant. Now they felt different, full of possibility. Behind her, guests were gradually gathering their coats and saying their goodbyes. The orchestra was packing away instruments. Servers moved between tables, clearing the last traces of the celebration. It felt like the ending of something. Yet Emily could not shake the feeling that she was standing at the beginning instead. William had stepped away briefly to take a phone call. Even from a distance, she could see how easily people gravitated toward him. Executives waited patiently for his attention. Staff members greeted him with genuine respect. Investors seemed eager to hear his thoughts. Yet what struck Emily most was how differently he treated everyone. Whether speaking with a hotel employee or a corporate chairman, his kindness never changed. The realization made her smile. Suddenly, she heard footsteps approaching. Emily. She turned and found Margaret standing beside her. The elegant woman carried a gentle expression that immediately put people at ease. I hope I am not interrupting. Not at all. Margaret glanced toward William across the ballroom. A knowing smile touched her lips. You have made quite an impression tonight. Emily laughed softly. I think he is the one who made the impression. Perhaps. Margaret looked at her carefully. But that is not what I meant. Emily frowned slightly. Margaret rested one hand on the railing. Do you know how many people have tried to impress William Sterling over the years? I can imagine. Thousands. She smiled. Very few succeed. Emily followed her gaze across the room. William was listening attentively to a hotel employee who appeared nervous about approaching him. He seems easy to talk to. Margaret laughed quietly. That is because you saw the version of him most people never reach. The statement surprised Emily. Before she could respond, Margaret continued. Do you know what he did before he came over to your table tonight? Emily shook her head. He canceled an international conference call. Emily blinked. What? A call involving 3 countries and several executives who had been planning it for months. Margaret smiled warmly. They were not pleased. Emily stared across the ballroom. Why would he do that? Margaret's eyes softened. Because he saw someone hurting. The simplicity of the answer somehow made it even more powerful. For a moment, Emily did not know what to say. Margaret continued. Most people think influence is measured by how many people serve you. She glanced toward William. His mother taught him it should be measured by how many people you serve. Emily felt emotion rise in her chest. The lesson sounded exactly like the woman William had described. A schoolteacher. A builder of longer tables. A person who made others feel seen. Margaret studied her expression carefully. There is something else you should know. Emily turned toward her. What? The older woman smiled gently. Tonight was not an accident. Emily immediately thought back to William watching from near the entrance. You mean he noticed me? Margaret shook her head. No, her smile widened. I mean he recognized you. Emily frowned. I do not understand. 3 months ago, William attended a literacy fundraiser. Emily froze. The memory surfaced instantly. A community event held in a neighborhood library. Volunteers helping children improve reading skills. She had spent the entire afternoon there. I was there, Emily said quietly. I know. Margaret nodded. William was one of the anonymous donors. Emily's eyes widened. Suddenly, she remembered a man standing near the back of the room, speaking with teachers and volunteers. She had barely noticed him. That was him. Yes. Margaret smiled. And afterward, he spent 20 minutes asking questions about a volunteer who stayed late to help every child finish their reading exercises. Emily felt her heart stop. Me? You? The ballroom seemed to disappear around her. All the noise. All the lights. All the conversations. Gone. Margaret's voice softened. When he saw you tonight, he already knew something important. Emily swallowed hard. What? Margaret looked directly into her eyes. That your value had nothing to do with who left you. Across the room, William finished his conversation and began walking back toward them. Emily watched him approach. Not as a billionaire. Not as a chairman. Not as one of the most powerful men in America. But as someone who had seen her long before she ever realized it. And somehow, that changed everything. For a long moment, Emily could not move. She stood beneath the soft glow of the ballroom lights, watching William walk toward her, while Margaret's words echoed in her mind. 3 months earlier, in a neighborhood library, she had spent her Saturday helping children sound out words and finish books most adults would never notice. She had never expected recognition. She had never asked for it. Yet somehow, Someone had seen her. Not tonight. Not after heartbreak. Not after tears. Before any of that. The realization felt almost overwhelming. William stopped in front of them and looked between the two women. I hope Margaret is not telling embarrassing stories. Margaret smiled innocently. Only the true ones. William sighed dramatically. That is what worries me. For the first time all evening, Emily laughed without carrying any sadness behind it. The sound surprised even her. William noticed immediately. There it is. What? Emily asked. The smile you should have arrived with. His answer was simple, yet it carried more kindness than any grand gesture could have. Around them, the ballroom continued emptying. Chairs were being rearranged. Floral displays were beginning to disappear. The celebration was ending. But Emily no longer felt like someone left behind after the music stopped. She felt like someone stepping into a new chapter. Margaret excused herself shortly afterward, leaving them alone near the terrace. For a while neither spoke. They simply looked out over the city. The silence felt comfortable now. Familiar. Finally, Emily turned toward William. Why did you never tell me? He looked genuinely confused. Tell you what? That you already knew who I was. William smiled faintly. Because that was never the important part. It was important to me. Maybe. He leaned against the railing. But I did not help you because I recognized you from the fundraiser. Emily studied him carefully. Then why? William looked out toward the skyline. Thousands of lights stretched into the darkness. Because nobody deserves to feel invisible. The answer landed softly, yet it carried the weight of everything she had learned that night. The memory of his mother. The promise he made as a boy. The lessons success had taught him. The longer table he spent his life building. It all came back to that one idea. Seeing people. Truly seeing them. A cold breeze drifted across the terrace. Emily wrapped her arms lightly around herself. William immediately removed his suit jacket and offered it to her. She hesitated before accepting. The gesture felt natural. Not performative. Not calculated. Just thoughtful. Thank you, she said. You have thanked me enough tonight. Emily smiled. I do not think that is possible. William laughed quietly. Then his expression grew serious. Emily. Yes. Promise me something. What? He looked directly into her eyes. Do not let one person's decision become your identity. The words settled deep within her. Because that is what I almost did, she admitted. William nodded. Most people do. He paused. But your worth existed before Daniel entered your life. Emily felt emotion tighten her throat again. And it still exists now. For a few seconds she could not answer. Then she nodded. I understand. And she truly did. Earlier that day, she had believed her future depended on someone choosing her. Tonight taught her something entirely different. The right people do not create your value. They recognize it. A hotel attendant approached to let them know the reception was officially ending. Guests were gathering near the exits. Cars were arriving outside. The night had reached its conclusion. Emily handed William his jacket back. I guess this is goodbye. William looked at her thoughtfully. Perhaps. That single word made her smile. Neither of them rushed to define what came next. They did not need to. Some connections are not measured by time. They are measured by impact. Together they walked through the nearly empty ballroom one final time. The same room that had once felt enormous and lonely now felt warm and familiar. As they reached the entrance, Emily glanced back. Hours earlier she had sat alone, convinced she had lost everything. Now she realized something remarkable. She had not lost her future. She had lost an illusion. The future was still waiting. Outside, the city sparkled beneath the midnight sky. William opened the hotel door and held it for her. Emily stepped forward, then paused. You know something? She said. What? A smile spread across her face. Your mother built a very long table. For a moment William said nothing. Then he smiled. The kind of smile that comes from hearing exactly the right words at exactly the right time. Emily walked into the night carrying no bitterness, no humiliation, and no regret. Only a lesson she would remember forever. The people who matter most are not always the ones who stay in your life. Sometimes they are the ones who remind you that you belong in it.